Hi friends, this is Caitlin, and today I wanted to share with you my entry for Lawn Fawn and Maureen Simon's Monochrome Halloween Color Challenge. Maureen does an absolutely amazing job of creating these very detailed and layered scenes using lots of different stamp sets and dies, and I was really inspired by some of her amazing cards when I made this one to join her challenge. The base for my card is going to be this stitched hillside backdrop from Lawn Fawn, of course, and I cut the main piece out of some craft cardstock, and I'm making the sky on some white smooth cardstock, heavyweight, and so I'm going in with my distress inks, just creating an ombre effect for the sky, going from lighter where it touches the hillside up to darkest orangey reds up at the top. In case that wasn't clear, I'm sorry, my monochromatic color for this card and theme is going to be orange. So I kind of leaned from the orangey yellows to the orangey browns with orange in the middle and kind of used that spectrum to guide my color choices. I marked the top edge of the hillside with a pencil before I started my ink blending, just so I would have an idea of where my lightest color should start. And as I'm working my way up, you can see I'm kind of going back in between each of my colors to get as smooth a blend as possible. But I also knew that I would be adding lots of speckles and water droplets to distress this sky, so I wasn't overly concerned about getting a perfectly clean blend. For those splotches, I ended up using some clean water that I just blotted off with a paper towel, as well as going in with little flecks of the Crackling Campfire. And as always, all of the colors and the supplies that I use will be listed in that description box below for you, because I try to have them all on screen, but I also know that the minis can be so hard to read. I wasn't really going for realism or for these to be stars or anything. I just kind of wanted some texture and some dimension to the background. Then it was time to start inking up my hills and my frame, and I knew that I really wanted to push this craft so that it's still read as orange and not just craft. So I went in and just created a nice even wash with this medium orange and the carved pumpkin all the way around the frame, and then added in a piece of just white folded up printer paper so that I could use it to kind of mask off between my hillsides, and just started shading and creating some depth, adding in some of the redder oranges, more red orange, that's probably the way to say it, adding in a more red orange to the bottom of each hill and trying to create more of a light yellowy golden orange at the top, as if that's where the sunlight was hitting at the top of that hill. But again, there's nothing realistic about this, so you could really do it however you wanted. And I would like to point out that I did in fact pull out an orange and a brown blending brush to use for this, and then I immediately forgot and used my orange for the brown and ended up filling up my orange brush with brown ink, so that I had to clean it. But they clean very easily. I just used a damp paper towel and the brown ink came right off, and I was back to orange blendy goodness very quickly. If you haven't entered this challenge yourself, I definitely encourage you to think about it. You have until Monday, October 18th at 11:59 p.m., that's Pacific time, to put your entry in and post a picture and use Maureen Simon's hashtag that's on Instagram. If you want more information, you can go to the Lawn Fawn Instagram or Maureen's Instagram. I'll link them both in the description box below. And I just want to throw it out there that I am in no way affiliated with Lawn Fawn or Maureen. I'm not endorsed by them. I'm not sponsored by them. I get nothing out of this besides the fact that I thought this was a great challenge, and I think it would be really encouraging and inspiring for somebody else who might be stuck in a rut or just needs something fun to spark some creativity for them. So back to my card though, I'm mixing images from 3 different stamp sets to create this scene. I'm using Happy Harvest, You Autumn Know, and Spooky Village, all of course from Lawn Fawn, and those are going to be the main images. I'm just stamping everything out now, and then we'll be going into color with some Copic markers. To make this as easy as possible for myself, I shopped through all of my Copics and grabbed all of my YR markers and then any of the warm E family markers that I had, and I put them in a cup next to me so that way I wouldn't have to think about it. I just had all of my color scheme right there next to me to work. And you can see I'm starting out with this Wagon, and I really wanted to make it nice and smooth so that it would create a cool contrast when I go in to make my lumpy bumpy pumpkins, because I am a sucker for a lumpy textured pumpkin. But this was really fun, just kind of creating almost that like rusty feeling, almost like a nod to a red wagon, but because we're living in an orange world, it's nice and orange. But I did want to keep it really smooth just to again create that contrast of textures. I also tried to plan out in my head some of the color combinations I wanted to use for specific items, because I knew I didn't want to do any combos directly next to each other. Like, I wouldn't want the wagon and the pumpkins to be the exact same color combination, because then they would all just kind of bleed together and look like one big lump. The fun thing about this monochrome is really finding those different shades and values of that color and playing them off of each other, even adding in those different textures like I said before, just because it gives different values and creates variation even though you're really just using the same colors. This mouse is my favorite mouse of all the mice that Lawn Fawn has put out. I just love him so much. I call him Yay Mouse because he looks like he's going yay, and he's so sweet. I used him in my Flippy Flappy video, which if you haven't seen that, I will also leave a link to that in the description. It was so fun to make my first Flippy Flappy card, but I knew I had to pull him back out for this card because he is my favorite and he makes me smile. But I have to tell you, not using pink on his ears was so hard. I ended up going in with some of the lighter teen markers. I think it was like 11 and 13. But man, it was so hard not to reach for my R20. But that's kind of the point, right? These are fun challenges because it pushes you outside of your box. Because I use each R20 all the time, but it's nice to change it up sometimes too. I colored in this sweet little pumpkin patch from the Spooky Village set and then moved on to the houses, and for the most part I colored all of them at the same time because I knew I wanted them to all go together. I wanted this to be a little spooky community, a little Halloween town vibes, so they would all kind of match and coordinate together, especially because again I have a limited color range, I have a limited number of markers I can use, and so I thought it would be cuter if they all went together instead of really trying to create strong contrast. And that way some of my other bigger items in the forefront of the card will create that depth and contrast instead, and these will all kind of just go together like a cute little set. Another thing that I found really helpful when I was trying to pick my markers was referring to my Sandy Allnock Copic hex chart. I found that really helped me to see the colors, see which ones kind of lined up together, and to really be able to tell, like, is this warm? Is it warm enough? Does it go with the oranges and yellows? When I was picking through my e-markers. So if you don't have that, I promise you it's a great investment. I think it's like $1 or $2 on Sandy's website. I didn't get it at first when I didn't have a lot of markers, and now I kind of wish that I had, because I probably would have picked different markers to build my collection if I had seen what colors were near each other when you're blending from the beginning. So highly recommend, 10 out of 10. So now I'm going in and giving all of my houses a sweet warm little glow. And when I blended that out, I lost some of the contrast. So I just went in to give a shadow of a glow, if that makes any sense. And then colored in these sweet little jack-o'-lanterns. And I even colored in my ghosts not white. Can you believe it? You can't really see it in the finished product, but I did go in with an e-marker on my little ghosts just to make sure that I was very thorough and the whole thing was truly orangey and not white. Speaking of, when I die cut my images out, I was very bothered by the stark white edges of my die cuts. I thought that it just contrasted way too much with all of the orange and brown that I had built up. And so I'm going in with my YR21 marker and filling in the white space all the way around every single die cut. And I think that it gives it such a nice, softer feel, that warm and cozy vibe. I just absolutely love it. I have no regrets about that part, and I'm definitely going to think about doing that more often in the future because I had never considered coloring that space before. I also grabbed my Wavy Sayings banner and die cut a piece of white cardstock and colored that in with the YR21 as well. And in a minute, that's what I'll be putting my sentiment on. But first, I wanted to get my frame and my background attached and start getting my pieces ready. So that way I would know exactly how much space I had for my sentiment in case I needed to change up my original plan and pick some different words to fit on my banner. So I did cut some thin strips of foam tape to go all the way around that frame, and then I popped up my hills a little bit. I tried to keep it kind of uneven so that way I could have space between the hills to kind of tuck some of the corn stalks and other things into the hill if I wanted to. I really love this set because you get those die cut lines in between to separate the hills, and you can make them as drastically stuck up and down as you want. I've played around with foam tape before and really created some hefty dimension between these hills, and it's super fun. Today I decided to keep it a little more streamlined than that, but this is definitely one of those dies that you can really play around with. I love it. I was having a hard time lining up my frame, and then it occurred to me it would make more sense to flip it over and put the panel onto the frame from behind instead. Once I did that, it got much easier. So now I'm just going in and laying down my houses. The little trio I did stick up on foam tape because I wanted it to sit just in front of the edge of that hill line. This other house I'm gluing flat with glue because I want him to kind of tuck behind, and we're going to disguise that left corner where it's not quite flush against the hill using that sweet little pumpkin patch. And then I also wanted to play up dimension by tucking in some of these spooky autumn trees that come in the Spooky Village set. So I laid that down flat as well, and then popped up the last little house with foam tape. So these are kind of just flush with the frame, the ones that are popped up. They're not extra dimension, but it still creates enough dimension and variety with that background that I think it's super sweet. I love how it turned out. I decided not to use that third tree. And then when it was time to go with my corn stalks, originally I thought I wanted them to go at the bottom, but because they're kind of just sitting there with a die cut and it wasn't really going to fit with my banner, it was going to kind of cut it off, I decided to actually trim them down and have them coming out of that middle hill section. And I love how this turned out. I think they look way more organic. They still add an extra layer of dimension and help to push those Spooky Village houses back a further step from the mouse, which I think is really cute. And it was just a nice way to add an extra little layer without really taking anything away from the piece. It doesn't really block much. I think I just lost that one little door, but it's totally fine. And then it was time to get my banner ready. I was just so excited to glue down the mouse on that pumpkin. I'm not gonna lie, that's all I wanted to do. To get my sentiment to curve perfectly with my banner, I flipped my banner upside down and then used this clear acrylic ruler, but you could also use an acrylic block to bend and curve the sentiment to match that shape. This is my favorite way to do that, and it makes it look so custom and perfect, like it was made just for that banner. I'm going to adhere my last couple pieces all with liquid glue, and then that is another card project wrapped up. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really enjoyed making this card, and if you haven't entered Marine and Lawn Fawn's monochromatic Halloween challenge, I definitely encourage you to look into it. Like I said, I'll have all of the links and more information in the description box below for you. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, definitely click on that button. We have a lot of fun here, and we still have a couple more great weeks until Halloween, and don't worry, I have some even more exciting Christmas things coming up soon and some partnerships that I'm really excited to tell you about. I hope that you have a great day, that you're having an amazing October, and as always, happy crafting.